All right, you ready?
Yep, I'm ready. It's recording, right?
All right.
So, uh, in today's presentation, I'm gonna tell you the summary of my blog and the things that I've learned from this project, as well as my mother's history and how and different communities she lived in and how they influenced her life and what were the differences between the mainstream culture of that time and my mother's borderland community. And on this slide, you can see the overview of my mother's whole life. I made it in 3 sections. First was small Polish Wirtz community where she spent her childhood. Then her youth, she was living in industrial town socialist community where she would work and create her ideals. And finally, now she's living in progressive megapolis community where she could achieve her dreams and where she gave birth to me. So yeah, next slide. So let's talk a little bit about my mother's childhood. She was born in Ural Mountains in Soviet Russia, in small village by the name of Krasny Kluch. People there mostly ate fish and vegetables. There was no meat. They were isolated from other world. Their borderland community was really small and cozy. Everyone knew everyone. Everyone helped each other. Also, this village had a lot of veterans as World War II ended recently, and a lot of people, a lot of retired veterans were living in villages like this, in houses that were presented to them by Soviet Union. And the differences between Soviet mainstream culture and this culture of this borderland community was drastical. Soviet culture was about progress, about socialism, about winning a race between Soviet Union and United States, while this small village knew little of this. They were living those small happy lives, helping each other, fishing, and were all living quiet and peace life. But everything changed when my mother moved to when my mother's father moved to another city to work on a new factory that just opened there. And so my mother changed her place of living. Next slide. And now I would like to tell you about Komsomolsk, the very socialist city, where Soviet propaganda was at its most powerful. Red banners, glorification of the party and the rulers, everything accompanied my mother's youth. She went to school there. She went to university. She started her first university there. And overall, her ideals of being first, of being best, were formed here under the heavy influence of Soviet mainstream culture. This city, borderland community, and Soviet Union mainstream culture were almost identical. The progress, the glorification of the party, the arms weapon against America, all those factors were influenced my mother and shaped her drastically. And she wants to be the first in everything. Also, this community gave her a strong sense of equality, social equality. My mother believes still to this day that everyone is equal and everyone has a place in this world. This is something that was given to her by socialist ideals. And this city gave my mother love for big cities because it was drastically different from her previous community, and she embraced this new community. And in youth, it has shaped her vision of the city she would like to live in. And after some time, she went to new university and moved to a new city by the name of Kiev. Back there, Soviet Union has collapsed, and following her dreams, my mother went to new city, to capital of newly formed Ukraine to achieve her dreams. Next slide. So as right now, my mother is living in the capital of Ukraine. Ukraine is really, it's a young country. It's 25 years old. And she came here to fulfill her dreams and ambitions, as I already told you. And surprised, but she actually managed to do it. And she became a strong member of community of the city. This city is filled with opportunistic spirit, as whole of Ukraine is having this laid back mentality. Kiev is drastically different from them. People come here to achieve their dreams, to get their hopes, to try their luck. Some succeed, some not. My mother succeeded, and her welfare and her life level has drastically risen. She gave birth to me in this city, and so I am here because my mother was trying to achieve her dreams and came in the city. Um, and this city is filled with this scent of opportunistic spirit. Everyone here is competing with each other and trying to get the best thing and to get the best fate for them. And overall, yeah, this is a city of dreams, the city of progress, the city of ambitions. This city requires you to be cunning and strong-willed to be a strong member of the community, or the city can break you. Next slide. And as for now, I have told you almost all the story of my mother's life, from small forest community to strong socialist town, and then to giant megapolis, how she was living her peaceful life. Then, because of her father's ambition, she moved to a socialistic town. And in that socialistic town, her own ambitions started to rise. And those ambitions were fulfilled in the megapolis community of Kiev City. So how did her borderland communities change, and how they were different from mainstream communities of that time? Well, in the forest, her forest borderland community was drastically isolated from mainstream. However, when she moved to a town, socialistic town of Komsomolsk, her ideals and her borderland community culture was identical to Soviet Union. And you can see this drastic jump between different communities. And all those jumps have influenced her in some way. For example, the small village community taught her altruism and respect for veterans, as she was her Soviet community gave her ambition, gave her sense of equality with everyone. And megapolis community gave her sense of opportunity, of being the one who goes for her dream. And most importantly, this city gave her a chance to achieve those dreams. So yeah, from a small girl that was living in an isolated village, she walked a path to a strong businesswoman that right now is currently trying to achieve even more greatness in giant megapolis city. Next slide. So what did I have learned from this project? Well, first of all, I've learned a lot about my mother's past, about her ideals, about her motivations, and also how historical events like collapse of the Soviet Union, our arms race with the United States have influenced my mother's life. Also, the most important thing from this project that I think I have learned is the concept of borderland community, borderland culture, and how those cultures are different from each other, how they're formed, how they're functioning. And additionally, I've learned what nationality and nation is. And let's talk a little bit about readings. Well, from Anderson, I have learned what nation and nationalism are, how they're formed, and what nationalism is at all. Rosaldo has mostly taught me about borderland communities and their structure, how they're formed, how they're functioning. And finally, Williams have taught me what culture is and how this cultures can be understood and can be examined. Overall, this was a great project, and I'm really happy that I did it because I've learned a lot of new stuff. I learned new concept. I learned new history. I kind of unraveled my mother's different past that I never knew about before. And I also learned some historical concept for like nationality and culture. So yeah, thank you. Next slide.
My oral history, I judged my mother's life from when she grew up in the Bronx in New York, and going to the College of the Arts, and then finally moving to California to escape the Jewish traditions that were pretty much forced on her at a young age. Next slide. The Bronx in New York, where she was born, was once known as the city of fear due to the constant fires and gang riots happening there. Even some of the negative energy she absorbed back then as a young child. By positive about the Bronx, from all the Jewish customs and traditions she was able to learn from her family, including her own grandmother. Patrice, who she had a great bond with. After so much time in New York, her parents decided to move to Monroe, New York, so that her and her sisters could all live in a more safer environment. Monroe, she was much better than Bronx, but was still not that great. It was a little bit poor, it was a little bit hard, but it was still easy for her. She was able to make new friends and still be sociable during those times. Next slide. After she graduated from high school at 1 year early than the rest of her family, she went to FIT, the Fashion Institute of Technology, which I never knew about, in Manhattan, New York. At the time there, she spent a whole 2 years of school. She had a really good grade for an average with mines. This, she was able to graduate on time with a degree in arts. Basically, she was able to make her parents proud, including keeping to her customs and traditions back then, which was very hard at that time for a young Jew at during that time, which very much surprised me and made me more proud of her. Okay, next slide, please. And moving to California, her parents were like, "Yeah, it'll be fine. Nothing's gonna happen to her." In the early '80s, my parents and the traditions, she was actually able to escape these traditions by moving to New York and starting new ones. When she moved there, she not know much of the culture or any of the habits or about earthquakes. The first earthquake she experienced there, she thought that was actually a train. When she first arrived in California, first thing she did was go to Fatburger and eat a cheeseburger the first time in her life. She described it as greasy, cheesy, and meaty, and very delicious. Made me jealous. After that, she immediately called her parents and told them about this. They were like, "Yeah, they're okay with it." And they made her learn that he was okay with these Jewish traditions, and she was able to combine them with the Californian culture together. Within a month of in California, she was able to was hired as a designer for a Jewish company called JBI right here in Long Beach, California, which made her parents very proud. During this time, she was able to become more accustomed to this culture, to this new foreign community, finally be able to eventually got married and had me. Okay, next slide, please. Tell me of my mother's life and what I learned from this class. My blog basically reflects on my mother's life from growing up from the harsh community of the Bronx to the beach life of SoCal. It was her strong determination to succeed in the design field as well as life itself. For example, the born in a community taught her new cultures from different cities, but kept the diversity of different cultures the same to her. Both New York and California have a high minority group. She laughed at the fact that she left a strict Jewish family to only be hired by a strict Jewish devoted company, which her parents found a little ironic and funny as well. Next slide. Okay, what I learned from this assignment. In this assignment, I was able to learn more about my mother, which fascinated me about her childhood. I learned about the challenges she faced and how they motivated her in her life's journey. I also learned what a Boiler community was and how they work. And better understand nationality is defined by a person's perspective. Now to the readings. Madison, I know what a nation is and how nationality is defined. In Zara, I learned what a border community is and their importance, and how they are defined differently. And lastly, from Williams, I now have a better understanding of what culture is and understanding about my mother's life and how she was grew up as a Jew in New York. Okay, next slide.
All right. So I'm going to speak about my grandma and her oral history. One thing that I would like to point out is the difference between my grandmother and Ivan Avery's parents or mothers is the fact that my grandma has grown up and lived in Colorado her entire life. So first things first was her growing up during the civil rights era. Next, her going to college as a Black single mother. And lastly, becoming a police officer. Growing up during the civil rights era, my grandmother was born in Colorado, Denver, Colorado, June 28th of 1944. She was actually an only child, and from growing up, she lived with her mother and her father. Her father was a retired Marine officer, which he spent over 25 years in the Marines. After that, he was pretty much at home, and he helped take care and bring her up until he passed away at a young age for her. but she was pretty much taken care of. They did not struggle with money financially because of the military, so she did not have the same struggles as other people of color, but she did face other struggles just because she was a person of color. With that, she was brought up to be a respectful woman. Regardless of how other people treated her, she always had the mentality of treat others how she wanted to be treated. Going to college, she ended up graduating, excelling in high school, and from there, she was given a scholarship for being a Black woman as one of the first scholarships they gave to Black women because of their diversity and that they wanted to have more diversity at colleges. So what they ended up doing was giving out Black scholarships. My grandma went to Colorado University, where she graduated with a bachelor's degree in counseling, and she later went on to get her master's degree. Only reason my grandmother actually continued on to get her master's degree was because there was a lady who she was talking to who told her she would not be able to excel and go any further. So my grandma took it as a challenge and continued on with her education. She did this while having my mother. She was actually a single mother. She met a man while she was in college where she thought she was in love and they were together. They had my mother. Later, the man disappeared and was no longer involved in their life. After all those challenges, my grandma received her master's degree and she decided that she wanted to do something more achieving, and she went into the police academy. This was a huge achievement for her because during that time, there's very few Black officers. On top of that, Black female officers. My grandma was a police officer in the 1970s where she finished the academy and became a loyal police officer for over 20 years. After being a police officer for about 15 years, she decided that she wanted to do something more with her career, so she became a DARE officer, and she helped teach younger kids keep off the streets and keep out of violence, gangs, and doing drugs, so drug prevention. She helped these kids for about another 5 years until she retired. At which she retired, she was injured badly when she was on a mountain hiking trip with the kids, and she fell down the mountain, so she was forcibly retired. But she loved her job and she still keeps in touch with a lot of the friends she made while she was a police officer. Summary of my grandmother. I found my grandmother very inspiring. If you look back at my blog, I spoke about how I spent a lot of time growing up with my grandmother at home and that we became very close. I find her very determined and very inspiring. Um, what this assignment did for me was kind of just reminisce and speak with her about the different struggles that she faced when she grew up. It kind of makes me just think about the struggles that we're currently facing in our society when it comes to going backwards in our ideals. Um, it was a great assignment, and I definitely did enjoy doing this assignment. I enjoyed mostly looking at other people's assignments and their blogs and learning about other people's cultures and borderlands and nationalities. It's very enjoyable. Um, but what I really took from this class was just a better understanding of nationality. I spoke about my nationality and how I identify when it comes to this nation and my nationality. Um, Borderlands, as we spoke about Anderson and the Borderland communities, and then Rosaldo, or Anderson and nationality, and Rosaldo, the Borderlands, and then culture from Williams. It was a great assignment, and I definitely did enjoy the readings. Lastly, we want to thank everybody for listening to our video and watching, and we hope you all have a good rest of your day.